If I were among you today, Machiavelli's doctrine of invisible power, listen carefully. If I, Niccolò Machiavelli, were alive in your modern world, I would not be writing treatises or publishing manifestos. I would not be building a platform or accumulating followers. No. I would be doing what I have always done best, operating in the shadows, pulling strings so delicately that those being moved would swear their actions were born of their own will, their own destiny. In this age of yours, where everyone screams for attention, where visibility has become confused with power itself, I would dominate through the one thing your generation has forgotten how to weaponize: invisibility. True power has never been about being seen. It has always been about being felt without being noticed. It is about controlling outcomes while remaining absent from the narrative. It is about winning wars before anyone realizes they are being fought. Today, I will share with you, not quotes from scholars or philosophers, but doctrine. Pure, undiluted psychological strategy. These are the 21 rules I would employ if I walked among you now. Rules forged not in theory, but in the brutal realities of human nature that remain unchanged across centuries. What worked in the courts of Renaissance Florence works in your boardrooms, your social circles, your digital empires. Because people, my friends, have not evolved. Their masks have simply become more sophisticated. Rule 1. Let them underestimate you. Always I once wrote that men judge more by the eye than by the hand. This truth has only grown more powerful in your image-obsessed age. Everyone around you is desperate to prove themselves, to flash their credentials like peacocks spreading their feathers, to assert dominance, to demonstrate they are the most intelligent person in any room. This desperation is their weakness. I would exploit it mercilessly. If I entered your world today, I would never walk into a room announcing my presence. I would arrive last, observe first, and speak only when silence has already done half my work. I would let others fill the air with their need for validation, while I study the dynamics, identify the power structures, and locate the pressure points. When I finally spoke, it would be precisely what no one else had the courage to say, delivered at the exact moment when it could not be ignored. This is the art of controlled underestimation. Let them believe you are quiet because you have nothing to say. Let them believe you are harmless because you smile easily. Let them believe you are small because you do not puff yourself up with artificial importance. Why? Because when people believe you pose no threat, they perform for you. They reveal their true selves. They expose their ambitions, their fears, their strategies, completely unguarded. And that is when you strike. Not with violence, not with confrontation, but with strategic moves they never saw coming, because they were too busy watching the loud ones, the obvious ones, the ones who announced their intentions. You have already positioned yourself where they are most vulnerable, and by the time they realize what has happened, it is far too late to defend against it. Remember this: the appearance of harmlessness is one of the most dangerous weapons in psychological warfare. Master it, and you will watch your enemies destroy themselves trying to compete with threats that were never real, while you dismantle them from angles they never protected. Rule 2. Charm is more dangerous than truth. In your hyper-connected, image-obsessed society, I see something remarkable. Truth does not spread. Perception spreads. What people believe about you matters infinitely more than what you actually are. I understood this centuries ago when I wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. Today, this principle has become the foundation of all power. If I walked among you, I would not waste a single moment trying to prove my integrity, my honesty, or my good character. These are luxuries for those who do not understand the game. Instead, I would invest all my energy in constructing an illusion so compelling that questioning it would seem absurd. I would smile warmly in your boardrooms while planting seeds of misdirection. I would charm my enemies, feeding them false confidence, making them believe I am on their side, that I wish them well, that I celebrate their success. This is not deception for its own sake. This is strategic theater. You do not need to be good. You need to be believed as good. The man who is perceived as noble can move with far greater freedom than the man who is actually noble but perceived as suspicious. Why? Because people defend the version of you they have constructed in their minds. They will make excuses for you. They will rationalize your actions. They will fill in gaps in your story with favorable assumptions. So never waste energy correcting how people see you unless their perception actively limits your options. Most of the time, their misunderstanding of your nature is an asset to be exploited. Let them crown you the hero in their narrative, while you quietly, methodically rewrite the ending to serve your purposes. By the time they realize the story did not go as they expected, you will already be untouchable, and they will have no one to blame but their own judgment. In your world of social media and personal branding, I see people obsessed with authenticity. How foolish. Authenticity is vulnerability dressed in noble language. I would give them instead a carefully curated version of myself, authentic enough to be believable, but controlled enough to serve my strategic goals. That is the real art, being whatever they need you to be while remaining something entirely different beneath the surface. Rule 3. Create ambiguity on purpose. Most people in your world fight desperately to be understood. They over-explain themselves, clarify their positions, fill every silence with words designed to prevent misinterpretation. They believe that being clearly understood equals being in control. They could not be more wrong. If I were operating in your society today, I would do precisely the opposite. I would make myself deliberately difficult to define. One day I would be cold, the next generous. Sometimes I would fall completely silent. Sometimes I would be intensely present. Not because I am confused or unstable, but because I want them to be. Confusion creates obsession. Obsession creates focus. Focus creates influence. This is the psychological chain reaction I would engineer. When people cannot define you, something fascinating happens in their minds. They begin to study you. They analyze every word you speak, searching for patterns. They overinterpret your silences, projecting meaning onto your absence. They discuss you with others, trying to reach consensus on who you really are. Without realizing it, they begin to orbit your ambiguity like planets around a dark star, pulled by a gravity they cannot see but cannot resist. This is true power. You are no longer just a person in their world. You have become a puzzle, a mystery that demands to be solved. And puzzles, my friends, become fixations. The more someone tries to figure you out, the more mental energy they invest in you. The more mental energy they invest, the more influence you have over their thoughts, their decisions, their actions. I would tell you this truth directly. The people you control most completely are the ones who think about you most frequently. So, stop over-explaining yourself. Stop clarifying your position to make others comfortable. Stop filling every silence with nervous words. Leave gaps in your narrative. Speak in statements that can be interpreted multiple ways. Smile knowingly when they ask you questions you have no intention of answering, because confusion breeds curiosity, and curiosity becomes gravitational pull. They will return to you again and again, trying to understand, trying to categorize, trying to pin you down. And every attempt will fail, which will only intensify their need to try again. You will haunt their thoughts without ever declaring your presence. That is the kind of power that lasts. Rule 4. Control what they see. Hide what you do in your transparent age, where everyone broadcasts every step of their journey. Where personal branding demands constant updates and visible progress. I would move through shadows like a ghost. This would be my greatest advantage. While everyone else documents their processes, explains their strategies, and shares their playbooks in real time, I would keep my mechanisms completely hidden. Here is what your generation has forgotten. The second people see how you move, they start preparing countermoves. They form defensive alliances. They construct competing narratives. They plant obstacles in your path. Every piece of your strategy you reveal is a piece your enemies can use against you. This is elementary, yet I watch as person after person, business after business, leader after leader, voluntarily surrenders their strategic advantage for the temporary pleasure of recognition. What would I do differently? I would keep my output public, but my input completely private. I would appear transparent, sharing results, showing outcomes, demonstrating impact, while guarding the actual machinery of how I achieved those results as if my life depended on it. Because in many ways it does. The moment people understand your system, they can replicate it, or worse, sabotage it. But if they only see the results without comprehending the process, you remain magic. You remain unpredictable. You remain dangerous. I once wrote that a prince must always be prepared to act against loyalty, against charity, against humanity, against religion in order to preserve the state. Let me translate this for your modern context. Appear noble in your public actions, but move ruthlessly in private. Never reveal your true strategies. Never explain the systems that give you advantage. Never tell people what you are building until the structure is already complete and functional. Let them believe you work slowly. Let them think you are resting while they grind. Then pass them by with a silence they never prepared for, achieving in months what they believed would take years. They will call it luck. They will call it privilege. They will call it anything except what it actually is. Superior strategy executed in darkness while they performed for an audience that could not help them win. Control the feed, what they see, but guard the factory, how you actually produce results. This asymmetry between visible results and invisible methods is where true competitive advantage lives in your modern world. Rule 5. Build a mask, then let it fracture. I have watched human nature for decades. In courts and conflicts, in alliances and betrayals. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty. Perfection is forgettable. But carefully revealed imperfection is addictive. This is a principle every skilled manipulator in your world now employs, often without understanding why it works. Let me explain the mechanism. You begin by constructing a mask, a version of yourself that is compelling and consistent. You become confident, poised, intelligent, unshakable. You project control in every situation. People begin to form an understanding of who you are, and that understanding feels complete. But completion, psychologically, equals dismissal. Once people believe they fully understand you, you lose your hold on their attention. They file you away in their mental categories and move on. Unless you allow the mask to crack. Just once, just enough. You reveal a controlled imperfection, a flash of unexpected anger that shows you are not as calm as you seemed. A moment of vulnerability that reveals depths they had not imagined. A sudden burst of profound insight that makes them realize you have been operating on a level far above what they perceived. These fractures in the facade create cognitive dissonance. The version of you they thought they understood no longer fits the data. And that inconsistency, that gap in their comprehension, becomes an obsession. Why does this work? Because people do not obsess over what they already understand. They obsess over what feels just barely out of reach. You give them 90% of the story, enough to think they know you, then you go silent. They will chase that missing 10% for years. They will replay conversations, looking for clues. They will test you in future interactions, trying to see behind the mask again. You have transformed from a person they understood into a mystery they cannot solve. I wrote that a wise ruler should cultivate an appearance of virtue while being ready to act contrary to it. In your personal psychology, this means you show them the light, the controlled, virtuous version of yourself. Then, once, you let them glimpse the darkness beneath. Not evil, just complexity, depth, danger, something that suggests you are far more than your surface presentation. Then you close the curtain before they can see more. This fractured mask makes you unforgettable. They will not remember you because the mask was beautiful. They will remember you because they saw it slip, and now they desperately need to know what lies behind it. That need will keep you alive in their thoughts long after you have left their presence. That is not influence. That is haunting. Rule 6. Say less than necessary. Always. When people speak too much, they reveal everything about themselves without realizing it. They reveal their weakness through their need for validation. They reveal their fear through their need to be understood. They reveal their emotional dependency through their inability to tolerate silence or ambiguity. Every excess word is information handed freely to anyone skilled enough to interpret. But the person who speaks with surgical precision and stops before explaining too much, that person dominates every interaction. I did not speak to be understood. I spoke to create distance, to maintain control, to shape perception without surrendering position. I used words like a swordsman uses a blade, with intention, with economy, with devastating precision. In your modern world, imagine yourself in a negotiation, a disagreement, a moment of high tension. While everyone else rushes to explain themselves, to justify their position, to fill the uncomfortable silence, I would speak one sentence. 2 at most. Then I would stop and let the silence do the real work. That silence is where psychological power accumulates. Why does this work so effectively? Because the moment you stop speaking, they start projecting. Their minds race to fill the void you have created. They begin to wonder, what does he know that I do not? Why is he not reacting? What is he planning next? You have said almost nothing, but in their heads, they have written an entire novel of possibilities, and in every version, you are the one with hidden knowledge, with superior position, with moves they have not anticipated. This is the paradox of communication. The less you say, the more weight each word carries. When you speak rarely, people listen completely. When you explain minimally, people assume maximum complexity behind your reasoning. Your silence becomes more powerful than their paragraphs, because silence cannot be countered, cannot be debated, cannot be used against you. So, in moments of power, what do you say? Exactly enough. Not enough to satisfy their curiosity, not enough to impress them with your knowledge, just enough to control the rhythm of thought in the room. Then you stop. You let them lean in. You let them make guesses. You let them experience the discomfort of not knowing what you are thinking. Because mystery, real psychological mystery, is forged in the space between words, in the things you choose not to say, in the silence you refuse to fill. Master this, and you will watch as people attribute to you wisdom you never claimed, strategies you never explained, and power you never had to assert because they constructed it for you in the vacuum of your restraint. Rule 7. Blur. The line between threat and ally. In your modern world, people are obsessed with clarity about relationships. They desperately want to know, who is on my side? Who is against me? Who can I trust? Who represents a threat? This need for certainty is a weakness I would exploit without mercy. If I were operating today, I would never allow people that comfort. I would sit at dinner with my enemies and speak to them as friends. I would compliment my rivals publicly, praising their work while privately understanding exactly how to outmaneuver them. I would defend people I had already marked for removal, creating confusion about my true allegiances. Why would I do this? Because of a simple principle. When people perceive you as dangerous, they prepare for war. But when they believe you are neutral or even supportive, they relax their defenses. And the best time to move against someone is when they are relaxed, when they believe themselves safe. I once wrote that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. This means you must be both creatures simultaneously. You must have the fox's cunning to avoid being caught, and the lion's strength to intimidate when necessary. But the key is knowing when to be which animal, and never letting others predict your nature. So you complement your enemy's proposal in the meeting, making them believe you are aligned with their vision. Then, privately, you outmaneuver them so completely they never see it coming. You agree with your critic, disarming their aggression with unexpected validation. Then you replace them in silence before they realize the agreement was tactical, not genuine. You appear passive, even supportive, right up until the moment your absence becomes a weapon. When they realize too late that you were the one holding their structure together. And now that you have withdrawn your support, everything collapses. Be warm. Be supportive. Be the person who seems to want everyone to succeed, right up until the moment you make your move. And by that point, it is far too late for them to defend themselves because they never saw you as a threat. They saw you as an ally, perhaps even a friend. The betrayal they feel is just their misunderstanding of the game finally catching up to reality. The modern translation is elegantly simple. Say less, smile more, play neutral in public, and then remove obstacles to your goals while everyone is still confused about whether you were even a player in the game. Let them realize what happened only in retrospect, when the outcome is already irreversible. Rule 8. Make them feel safe right before you take power. The easiest way to remove someone from their position is never through direct confrontation or open conflict. It is by making them believe you represent no threat whatsoever, that you are on their team, that you want them to succeed, that you are learning from them, following their lead, supporting their vision. And then, precisely when they trust you most completely, you move. If I wanted to take someone's position today, I would study them meticulously. I would learn their patterns, mimic their language, praise their ideas, and disagree only softly, only on minor points, and always in ways that made them feel like they were educating me. I would never make them feel like they were losing ground. Instead, I would make them feel like they were guiding me, shaping me, bringing me into their way of thinking. This feeling of mentorship, of superiority is intoxicating. It blinds people to danger. Once they feel completely safe around me, once they have let me inside their decision-making process, once they have shared with me the information and access that comes from trust, I would act decisively, quickly, cleanly. And by the time they registered what had happened, by the time betrayal began to sting, I would already be sitting in their chair, implementing my vision, using the systems they built but never fully controlled. I wrote centuries ago that men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims. This remains true today, perhaps more than ever. People want to believe the best about others. They want to trust. They want to feel secure. These desires override their strategic thinking, making them vulnerable to exactly this kind of patient, systematic approach. So what do? Tell them what they need to hear. Show them what they want to see. Make them feel valued, appreciated, safe in your presence. And while they are basking in that false security, you take what they never thought you wanted, what they never imagined you would reach for. And you do it all while smiling, while expressing gratitude, while making it seem like the transition was natural, inevitable, perhaps even their idea. That is the art. Not forceful takeover, but gentle, almost imperceptible displacement that is only understood as a takeover after it is already complete. Rule 9. Make people dependent. Then remove yourself. If I wanted to psychologically dominate someone in your modern world, I would never threaten them or intimidate them. That approach creates resistance and defensive strategies. Instead, I would help them, but not in obvious, simple ways. I would help them in ways that slowly, almost invisibly created dependence. I would teach them something no one else could teach. I would solve problems for them that no one else would take the time to solve. I would provide stability in their lives that they had not earned on their own, had not built for themselves. I would become irreplaceable in their world without ever asking for recognition or acknowledgement. And then, once that dependence was fully established, once they had reorganized their life or their work around my presence and contribution, I would leave. Not in anger, not with any show of revenge or punishment, just quiet withdrawal. The absence of explanation makes it more powerful. Why does this work? Because nothing destroys people psychologically faster than the sudden absence of something they have grown addicted to, especially when they never acknowledge their addiction. I understood that men are kept honest only by necessity. When they are free to act without constraint, they become dishonest, taking for granted what costs them nothing. So, I would become their necessary illusion, the person they believed they did not need until the moment I was gone. That is when the real work begins. That is when they understand what they had but never valued. That is when they realize the structure of their daily life was built on a foundation I provided, and now that foundation has disappeared. This is how you become unforgettable. Not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through creating a void. You make them lean on you, depend on you, build their confidence around your presence. Then you take your hand away mid-step. They stumble, they fall. They scramble to replace what they lost. And they cannot. Because what you provided was not just functional help. It was the specific way you understood them, the particular value you added, the unique stability you represented. They will not hate you for leaving. Or if they do, the hatred will be shallow compared to the deeper emotion underneath. They hate how much they need you. They hate that they cannot function at the same level without you. And they will spend months, perhaps years, trying to fill the space you left behind. Every replacement will be measured against you. Every new solution will be compared to how you did it. You have burned yourself into their psychology as the standard they can no longer reach. That is a far more complete domination than any threat could achieve. Rule 10. Weaponize the favor most people offer help because they want to be liked. They want to be seen as generous, kind, valuable. These motivations are transparent and therefore powerless. If I offered someone help, it would be for an entirely different reason. To create leverage, to establish a psychological imbalance that could be collected later, often in ways the person never anticipated. When I gave you something, a solution, a connection, an advantage, information that helped you succeed, I would not let you forget it. But I would never be crude about it. I would not immediately demand repayment. I would not keep a visible ledger. Instead, I would simply remain present. I would maintain contact. And in that ongoing presence, you would feel something gnawing at you. Indebtedness. An uncomfortable sense that the balance between us is not equal. That you owe me something you have not paid. This psychological imbalance is the point. It is the tool. You offer someone a shortcut, something that advances their position significantly. Then you pull back slightly. You do not ask for anything in return. You just let the imbalance exist. Let it ache in their consciousness like a pebble in a shoe. And over time, that discomfort grows. They begin to pay you back even without being asked. They pay in loyalty, defending you when others question you. They pay in favors, going out of their way to help you when opportunities arise. They pay in information, telling you things they would not tell others because they feel that debt between you. They pay in submission, deferring to your judgment because some part of them feels they still owe you. And if they forget, if they take your favor for granted and fail to maintain the balance, then you remind them, subtly, just once. Remember that time I helped you with. You do not finish the sentence aggressively. You just leave it there, hanging in the air like a question that does not need to be answered because both of you know the answer. That single reminder makes them realize something they had been suppressing. You own a piece of their pride. You have a claim on their success. They are not as self-made as they would like to believe. Favors, when used with patience and psychological precision, become chains. Not physical chains that can be broken with a single act of defiance, but mental chains that tighten the more someone struggles against them. The longer a favor stays unacknowledged, the heavier it feels in the person's psyche. They cannot escape it because it lives in their own mind, their own sense of fairness, their own understanding that they have received something they have not repaid. You do not have to enforce the debt. They enforce it on themselves. That is the elegance of this approach. Rule 11. Manufacture loyalty. By letting them betray others. For you people believe loyalty is earned through kindness, through good treatment, through mutual respect. They are wrong. I understood centuries ago that the most powerful loyalty comes not from how you treat someone, but from what you allow them to do for you. Specifically, from getting them to compromise their other relationships for your benefit. You do not force this betrayal. You never demand it. You simply create conditions where it becomes possible, even easy. You leave the door slightly open, and you wait to see if they walk through it. Here is how it works. Someone in your orbit has information they should not share with you. Perhaps about a competitor. Perhaps about a mutual acquaintance. Perhaps about internal workings of an organization. You never ask for this information directly. But in conversation, you create space for them to offer it. You express curiosity. You show that you would value such knowledge. You demonstrate that sharing it with you would elevate them in your estimation. And then they tell you. They break that small confidence. They cross that line. Maybe they justify it to themselves. It's not that important, or everyone knows anyway, or this person deserves it. But the justification does not matter. What matters is they have now done something they cannot undo. They have betrayed someone else to gain favor with you. Now they are tied to you. Not by admiration or genuine loyalty, but by complicity. And complicity is far stronger than admiration, because people protect the things they have compromised for. Once someone has betrayed others in your direction, they have invested in you. They have spent social capital, ethical capital, relationship capital to advance your interests. And the more they invest, the less they can afford to lose you. They cannot walk away from you now, because doing so would mean acknowledging that their betrayal was for nothing. That they damaged other relationships for someone who did not even value them. This is how I would create allies in your modern world. Not through charisma, not through inspiration, not through shared values, but through entanglement. Through making people complicit in small betrayals that accumulate into unbreakable bonds. They tell you one secret about a colleague, then another. Then they help you undermine a rival. Each action binds them more tightly to you, because each action makes it more costly for them to ever oppose you. To oppose you would mean confronting their own choices, their own compromises, their own transformation from innocent party to your instrument. The beauty of this method is that it requires almost no maintenance. Once the pattern is established, it reinforces itself. They continue to choose you over others because they have already chosen you so many times before. Their identity becomes wrapped up in being loyal to you. And that loyalty, born not from love but from accumulated compromise, is the kind that lasts. It is the kind people take to their graves because acknowledging it for what it is would require admitting truths about themselves they would rather not face. Rule 12. Break alliances from the inside. I did not just outmaneuver individuals. I dismantled entire networks, entire power structures, but never through frontal assault, never through open confrontation. That approach unifies your enemies, makes martyrs of your opponents, and often fails. Instead, I used erosion. I used psychology. I infiltrated the alliance and broke it from within, making them destroy themselves. Here is the method. I would never attack the alliance directly. I would study it first. I would identify its strongest bonds, the relationships that hold the structure together. Then I would plant seeds. Not accusations, not obvious manipulation, just small ideas that could grow. Seeds of doubt, seeds of misalignment, seeds that made people question whether their allies shared their values, their commitment, their vision. I wrote that he who causes another to become powerful ruins himself. This applies perfectly to alliances. The moment you make another person powerful within a group, you create potential resentment, potential competition, potential fracture points. So I would identify the person in the alliance who was gaining too much influence, becoming too central, and I would make sure others in the group noticed. Not through direct statements. Those can be traced back to me. Through questions, through carefully timed observations, through strategic silence that made people fill in their own concerns. I heard he said something about you. I would drop this into conversation with one member of the alliance about another member. I do not claim to know what was said. I do not even claim it was negative. I just introduced the possibility that something was said, that discussions are happening outside this person's awareness, that trust might not be as complete as they believed. That seed grows on its own. Have you noticed how she never really defends you? Again, just an observation framed as a question. The person I am speaking to will now watch for this in every future interaction. They will reinterpret past interactions through this new lens. Confirmation bias will do the rest of the work for me. They will find evidence everywhere, even in places where none exists, because I have directed their attention and humans see what they look for. I'm not saying anything. Just watch how they act around you versus how they act around others. This is the perfect intervention because it cannot be challenged. I have not made a specific claim. I have not accused anyone of anything. I have simply suggested observation. And observation, once suggested, cannot be stopped. They will watch. They will compare. They will find discrepancies, real or imagined. And those discrepancies will feel like betrayals. That is all it takes. You do not need to destroy the alliance yourself. You just make them destroy it from within. You let their fear of betrayal do the work. You let their insecurities amplify the small fractures into major breaks. Because once trust begins to crack inside a group, once suspicion takes root, the entire structure becomes unstable. Meetings feel different. Words are weighed for hidden meaning. Absences are noticed and interpreted negatively. The alliance that once felt strong and unified begins to feel like a collection of individuals who cannot quite trust each other anymore. And through all of this, where am I? Nowhere near the wreckage. I am not part of the alliance. I have no stake in their conflict. I am simply an outside observer, who perhaps coincidentally benefits from their collapse. They will never trace the destruction back to me, because I never threw a single punch. I just made sure they threw punches at each other. Rule 13. Reflect their insecurities. Back at them, gently. If you want someone to obey you without them realizing they are obeying, you must first make them feel seen. But not just seen in a very specific way. You need to make them feel understood in their deepest insecurities, their private self-doubts, the things they barely admit to themselves. And you do this not through insult, not through criticism, but through soft, carefully timed observations that confirm their worst fears about themselves, while positioning you as the one person who understands. Listen to how this sounds. You're really brave. Especially for someone who's not used to this kind of attention. What have I done here? I have complimented their bravery, which feels good on the surface. But nested inside that compliment is an acknowledgement of their discomfort with attention, their status as someone unaccustomed to being noticed. I have confirmed an insecurity while praising their struggle against it. You always seem to pull through, even when people don't take you seriously at first. Again, this sounds supportive. You are acknowledging their success. But you are also confirming that people do not take them seriously initially, that there is something about them that triggers dismissal, that they have to work harder than others to achieve the same recognition. You're doing really well, even if your confidence doesn't always show it. You see the mechanism now? You praise the results while highlighting the insecurity. You make them feel simultaneously validated and exposed. And that combination is psychologically powerful because it triggers agreement from their deepest pain. They cannot argue with you because you are saying something they already believe about themselves. But they also cannot distance themselves from you because you are being supportive and understanding. Once you have anchored yourself as the person who truly sees them, who understands their struggles without judgment, something shifts in the power dynamic. They begin to attach to you emotionally. They begin to defer to your judgment because you have demonstrated that you understand them better than they understand themselves. They begin to move under your emotional gravity, orbiting your perception of them, seeking your validation because you have positioned yourself as the only person who sees past their mask. Machiavelli understood centuries ago what modern psychologists now confirm. Fear and insecurity are far more effective tools than threats. Threats trigger defense mechanisms. People harden against threats. They prepare countermeasures. They build walls. But insecurities, when touched gently, when acknowledged with seeming compassion, these open doors. These create vulnerability. These make people grant you access to their internal world, without ever realizing they have given you power over how they see themselves. And once you are inside that internal world, once you have become the voice they hear when they doubt themselves, you do not need to give orders. You do not need to make demands. You simply frame situations in ways that trigger their established insecurities, and they will move in the directions you want them to move. Believing the entire time that they are making their own choices based on their own limitations. You have not controlled them. You have simply become the mirror in which they see themselves, and you have made sure that mirror reflects exactly what serves your purposes. Rule 14. Never be the one holding the knife in. Every betrayal, every removal, every ruthless elimination. I had one golden rule that served me throughout my career. Let others do the visible work. I would orchestrate outcomes, whisper strategic ideas, influence decisions through carefully placed suggestions. But I would never be the one standing in the spotlight when the blade fell. This principle is perhaps more important in your transparent modern world than it ever was in mine. When someone needed to be cut from an organization or a social circle, I would never advocate directly for their removal. Instead, I would make it seem like they were never truly loyal to begin with. I would highlight patterns of behavior that others had noticed but not articulated. I would ask questions that made their continued presence seem risky. Has anyone else noticed how he responds when confronted? Not an accusation, just a question that makes others look for evidence. When a rival needed to be removed from a position of influence, I would never attack them openly. Instead, I would let them self-destruct, usually with just the right amount of carefully calibrated provocation. I would create situations where their worst qualities were exposed to the people who mattered. I would ensure they were in the room during discussions, where they would inevitably say something damaging. I would give them enough rope, as the saying goes, and watch as they hang themselves while I stood at a safe distance, perhaps even appearing to have tried to help them. Rule 15. Say nothing and let them reveal everything. Silence is a weapon disguised as passivity. In today's noisy world, be the one who doesn't broadcast. Don't fill the silence. Let others choke on it. They'll tell you everything just to fill the space you've weaponized. Rule 16. Be unpredictable, but only when it matters. Predictability breeds manipulation. Unreadability breeds fear. Sometimes forgive, sometimes disappear, sometimes engage, sometimes watch them implode. Fear is born from uncertainty. Rule 17. Make your presence felt even in absence. Imprint yourself so deeply that when you're gone, they still play by your rules. That's psychological branding. Not content, energy. Rule 18. Never threaten. Let fear do the work. Fear based on imagination is stronger than fear based on information. Once they fear what you might do, they'll work for your approval just to avoid finding out. Rule 19. Delay revenge until it becomes devastating. Don't react instantly. Watch, wait, let them relax. Let them believe they've gotten away with it. Then move clean, calculated, absolute. Revenge isn't punishment, it's control. Rule 20. Become a system, not a man. Stop being a name. Start being a network, an idea, a standard embedded in how others operate. Even if they don't want you, they can't function without you. That's not influence. That's permanent psychological control. And Rule 21, the final form of power. Make them afraid to even speak your name. Don't trend, linger, don't win arguments, change the atmosphere. Be the one they reference indirectly, the shadow they feel but can't point to. That's how you win. Not with fame, not with noise, but with a legacy they can't stop. If Machiavelli were alive today, he'd be the voice in your head saying, don't respond, don't reveal, let them speak first. Don't chase respect. Position yourself so they can't breathe without it. That's how you win.